Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Ancient History Podcast. Ever feel like the world is moving too fast? Try living in ancient times, where a journey from Rome to China could take years. Tonight, we'll slow things down and explore how these epic treks shaped history in ways you've never considered. From the spread of religions to the mixing of genes, these slow travels were the original social network. So if you're ready to unwind and step back into a time when patience was the ultimate virtue, you're in the right place. Picture waking up before dawn to milk your goats one last time. You pat the family dog goodbye, knowing full well you might never scratch its ears again. This was reality for countless ancient farmers who joined trade caravans, ordinary people, walking far beyond the horizon while their old lives faded behind them. These weren't quick business trips. A typical caravan moved at 3 miles per hour max, with 50 to 300 people plus pack animals stretching nearly a mile long. Camels carried 400 pounds each, but needed frequent stops, meaning even fast journeys took months. Guards armed with slings walked ahead scouting for bandits, while merchants calculated how much profit would justify risking their necks. About 1 in 5 travelers didn't make it back. The psychological toll was brutal. Imagine walking weeks through the Syrian desert with nothing changing but the blisters on your feet. No Google Maps to confirm you're still headed the right way. No emergency sat phone when the water runs low. Just endless putting one foot in front of the other while your mind plays tricks, conjuring mirages of your village's plum trees. And comes the moment when everything changes. After months of trudging, your dust-caked sandals finally hit paved stone. Looking up, you see it, a city wall so high it blocks out the sun. The smells hit first: cumin, sewage, forge fires. Then the noise of 100 languages shouting market prices. Your donkey balks at the chaos as silk-robed officials demand entry tolls. This is Antioch, or maybe Memphis, or any of the hubs where worlds collided. What started as a simple trade run now rewires your brain. That weird fermented fish sauce locals love? Suddenly, it makes sense in this heat. Those bronze scales merchants' use look more practical than your village's barter system. And when you see a trader from even farther away displaying glowing blue stones no one can name, you realize how small your old world was. The physical changes accumulate too. Skeletal remains from caravan routes show fused vertebrae from heavy loads, along with arthritic knees that would make a modern orthopedist wince. But they also reveal healed fractures set by foreign healers, and teeth worn down from chewing tough travel rations. These bodies became living maps, scars from mountain passes, limps from river crossings, and sun-wrinkled skin marking every mile. When, if, you finally returned home, nothing fit right anymore. Your old tunic felt scratchy compared to Babylonian linen. Local beer tasted thin after sipping Mesopotamian date wine. And good luck explaining why you've started counting in that handy new number system from India. Your grandkids would later brag how their ancestor went east and came back strange, not realizing you'd smuggled in fragments of civilization with every loaded donkey. This slow-motion globalization worked because enough people kept walking. A teenage potter's apprentice might carry his master's designs to the next town, where someone tweaked the glaze recipe. 50 years later, that small innovation reached Egypt, looking nothing like the original. Multiply that by countless chance encounters at wells and crossroads, and you get the ancient version of cultural exchange, one dusty footstep at a time. These travelers became early cultural diplomats without knowing it. A Phoenician sailors. Offhand comment about tides could wind up influencing Greek philosophy generations later. A runaway slave might introduce new farming techniques just by demonstrating how his homeland grew yams. Every journey seeded ideas that grew in unexpected directions. But here's the catch. Most of these pioneers couldn't read or speak the languages around them. So how did you negotiate for food when your words were just noise? How did a Babylonian oil seller flirt with that Hittite spice merchant's daughter? Next time, we'll explore the silent languages that made civilization possible. Imagine standing in a bustling bazaar in ancient Babylon. A trader from India holds up a bolt of cotton while you show him your Egyptian glass beads. Neither speaks a word of the other's language. One wrong gesture could mean losing the deal. Or worse, in 3000 BCE, this was business as usual. The first trade negotiations didn't need translators. They needed patience and a good set of eyebrows. A bad hand gesture could get you killed. Some cultures took pointing as an insult. Others thought showing your palm meant you were lying. Traders learned the hard way that nodding yes in Greece meant no in parts of Mesopotamia. There's evidence of violent clashes erupting because someone misread a head tilt. Most caravans included at least one person who'd lost fingers in misunderstandings. People got creative fast. The Assyrians developed a whole system of hand signals for numbers. Hold up 2 fingers over a cloth to indicate price. Tap your elbow to show you wanted to bargain. The Chinese merchant across from you might counter. By placing weights on a scale, no words needed. Archaeologists have found tally sticks from 2000 BCE, notched with universal symbols. Wavy lines for water, circles for coins. Goods spoke for themselves. A Phoenician glassmaker could demonstrate his wares by pouring colored liquid into vessels. Persian rug sellers unrolled their products to show patterns. Spices were sniffed, fabrics rubbed between fingers. Some traders carried sample kits, small bits of materials that bridged language gaps. A lump of frankincense said more than any sales pitch. The first trade pigeons emerged organically. At Troy's harbor, you'd hear a mix of Hittite nouns with Greek verbs. In Egyptian ports, traders mashed up Nubian grammar with Akkadian words. These weren't languages proper, more like survival toolkits with 200 key terms. Good price, bad quality, where water. The essentials. Some lasted centuries. The Mediterranean lingua franca helped traders from Cyprus to Carthage argue about olive oil tariffs for 800 years. Hunger created universal translators. When a caravan's food ran low near the Hindu Kush, no one cared about grammar. Pointing at your mouth and rubbing your stomach worked in any culture. Thirsty travelers learned every society's gesture for water. Even enemies shared bread when starvation loomed. Some historians think communal meals smoothed more trade deals than any negotiation tactic. Trust built slowly. You might trade beads for fur one season, then add spices the next. After years, perhaps your granddaughter would marry his grandson. The Silk Road's great fortunes weren't made by lone wolves. They required generations of careful relationship building. Assyrian contracts from 1900 BCE show multi-decade partnerships between families who never spoke fluently. Silence had advantages. Without understanding gossip, you couldn't accidentally insult the local chief. Mute trading let minorities, like the Jews and Armenians, move between warring empires. Some smart traders played dumb to get better deals, pretending not to understand when competitors asked about roots. Objects carried hidden messages. A Babylonian might reject your copper not because of quality, but because the color matched his enemy's armor. The right seashell pattern could mean safe passage in one port and poison in another. Clever merchants kept mental ledgers of these silent codes. Find someone using your hometown's weaving style unexpectedly far away, and suddenly you had an ally. Body language revealed more than words. Experienced caravan leaders watch shoulders, not mouths. A tense trader might be hiding bandits ahead. Sweaty palms could signal a bad deal. Some cultures, like the Minoans, developed elaborate bowing rituals that functioned as credit checks. The depth of someone's bow indicated their clan's reputation. Children became living dictionaries. Mixed-race kids in trading hubs often grew up trilingual. Port cities like Ugarit had districts where families intentionally married across cultures to create natural translators. By 1000 BCE, certain bloodlines specialized in mediation. Their descendants still work as diplomats today. The trade languages left scars. Modern Spanish, almason, warehouse, comes from Arabic al-Naqsan, a term learned during silent trades. English Czech descends from Persian Shah, king, a symbol stamped on trusted goods. Even shibboleth originates from traders, using passwords to detect strangers. Some conversations happen purely through objects. A merchant might place a knife next to your wool, not to threaten, but asking if you wanted to cut a sample. Pot. Shards became makeshift contracts when broken in specific patterns. Archaeologists find these coded fragments from Rome to the Ganges. Miscommunication bred legends. The Greek story of the Carian smile comes from traders grimacing in concentration, being misread as mocking laughter. Chinese accounts tell of grunting barbarians who are actually trying to hum musical scales. One famous Babylonian text laments, "They bring good silver, but terrible manners." The real magic happened when these nonverbal lessons came home. A trader might copy a hand gesture seen abroad, not realizing it meant thief locally. Pottery glazes changed when artisans mimicked colors they couldn't name. Dancing styles merged after caravan guards imitated foreign battle stances around. Campfires. Even today, some Mediterranean gestures trace back to ancient deals sealed with a clasped wrist instead of a signature. These silent exchanges built something bigger than any single deal. When a Mesopotamian merchant learned to read Egyptian body language, He wasn't just acquiring a skill, he was wiring his brain for cross-cultural thinking. The children of these traders grew up expecting diversity. Languages eventually followed where goods and gestures had paved the way. But silent trade wasn't enough for everything. What happens when someone wants to explain why the stars move differently in their homeland? Or demonstrate a better way to irrigate fields? The really transformative ideas needed more than hand signals. They needed storytellers who could bridge not just markets, but minds, which is how walking became the world's oldest university tour. Imagine trying to memorize Wikipedia by heart, then walking across continents to share it. That was essentially the job description for ancient storytellers. They didn't just recite myths. They carried entire worldviews in their heads. One study of modern oral cultures shows professional storytellers can accurately recall narratives up to 20 hours long. Now picture that walking alongside camels for months in caravans, the storyteller's fire was prime real estate. A good one could make the difference between mutiny and morale. They'd pace stories to match the journey, adventure tales during hard climbs, love poems in river valleys. Their repertoires mixed practical knowledge with entertainment. That traumatic saga about the flood probably contained survival tips about high ground. The Body Tavern story likely included warnings about local scams. Technology spread through what archaeologists call show, don't tell. A potter from Crete wouldn't lecture about his wheel. He'd sit down and throw a vase. People learned by watching, then trying while the expert adjusted their hands. This hands-on teaching left traces. You can spot far-traveled techniques in things like sudden improvements in Egyptian faience around 1500 BCE, when Syrian glassmakers passed through dot geography lived in songs. Polynesian navigation chants contained wave patterns. Bedouin poems encoded desert springs in rhyme schemes. The Phrygians taught mountain passes through drinking songs, where each verse marked another day's hike. These weren't just clever. They were essential. Get one line wrong and your whole caravan could starve. One traveler with new seeds could reshape a region. Take the humble peach. Originally from China, it traveled westward when someone pocketed pits during a Silk Road. Stop. By the time it reached Greece, the fruit had changed through selective breeding at dozens of campsites. The Romang naturalist, Pliny, complained about newfangled Persian apples, not realizing they'd walked halfway across Asia first. The classroom had no walls. Astronomy lessons happened under actual stars, with travelers comparing constellations. Names. Medical knowledge grew when healers traded herb samples at stops. Even military tactics evolved as mercenaries swapped stories about strange new weapons. A Hittite soldier's throwaway comment about chariot modifications might end up revolutionizing Assyrian warfare a generation later. Distance made education creative. No blackboards meant using whatever was around. Traders calculated with pebbles. In the dust, weavers demonstrated patterns by finger-knotting grass. One Persian rug merchant taught mathematics by having students count threads and samples. The best teachers adapted on the fly. That history lecture might become a puppet. Show if children joined the audience. Languages mixed in unexpected ways. Along the Amber Road, Celtic and Germanic traders developed a counting system using both people's number words. It was clunky, but worked well enough to price goods. These pidgin languages became living textbooks, absorbing new terms at every trading post. Some caravan jargon still lingers. The word caravan itself comes from the Persian karwan, picked up by dozens of cultures. Special knowledge traveled in families. Certain clans guarded navigation tricks or metalworking secrets across generations. The Maki brothers of Phoenicia, famous for selling Tyrian purple dye, their real product was the closely held technique for making it. Apprenticeships happened. En route, a glassblower might take on students during the 6-month walk between workshops. Not all lessons were wanted. When travelers introduced better crop rotation to a village, local shamans often resisted. Some innovations took centuries to catch on. The Chinese had the horse collar long before Europe, but it only spread westward after countless traders saw how much more oxen could pull with it. Even then, many farmers stuck to the old painful yoke system just because it was familiar. Walking built different brains. Modern neuroscience shows that long-distance travel boosts spatial memory. Those traders navigating by landmarks weren't just skilled. Their hippocampi were likely enlarged from constant use. Oral cultures also develop superior auditory processing. The average caravan storyteller could probably detect lies just from voice tremors that would escape modern ears. The real test came when travelers returned home. Imagine explaining wheat cultivation to hunters used to gathering, or convincing fishermen that sailing farther could yield better catches. Some messengers weren't believed. Early accounts of elephants sounded like tall tales. Others faced violence. Several Chinese explorers were executed for reporting impossible. Western kingdoms that later proved real. Cultural exchange wasn't always peaceful. When steppe nomads demonstrated horseback archery, settled empires had to adapt fast or fall. The Hyksos conquered Egypt not just with weapons, but by bringing chariot tactics learned from distant Mesopotamian battles. Knowledge was power in the most literal sense, sometimes carried intentionally by spies disguised as merchants. The walking university had no diplomas, but its alumni changed the world. That anonymous farmer who brought rice paddies to India, the unsung trader who introduced compasses to the Mediterranean, they left no plaques or statues, yet reshaped civilizations. Even today, geneticists find knowledge transfer written in DNA. Certain populations show gene variants that spread alongside farming techniques carried by ancient travelers. But all this education required rest stops where ideas could simmer. Journey knowledge grew best where tired feet met warm food, places where gossip and holly. Invention mixed with ale and relief. And that brings us to history's most overlooked classrooms. The roadside inns where a roof overhead meant more than shelter. It meant chance to compare notes with strangers fresh from even stranger lands. You've been walking 18 days straight when the caravanserai walls finally appear through the dust. It's not much just squat mud brick with guard towers, but right now it looks like paradise. Inside those walls, water that won't give. You dysentery, something resembling a bed, and maybe even news from home. But first comes the awkward part handing your weapons to the warden, while praying nobody inside recognizes you from that business with the stolen goats last summer. These waystations were the ancient world's version of plugging in your phone at an airport. Same basic concept. Secure parking for your camels, a place to recharge, and terrible overpriced food. Except instead of Wi-Fi passwords, you got dysentery from the communal well. The Persian Royal Road alone had 111 of these, spaced exactly one. Days march apart early logistics at its finest. Most were government-run, which meant corrupt officials skimming profits, but also soldiers keeping bandits out. Worth the trade-off. Walk through the gates, and the noise hits first. A dozen languages bounce off the courtyard walls, some merchant. Arguing tariffs in broken Greek, camel drivers shouting in dialects nobody fully understands. The smell's worse. Animal dung, sweat, and whatever's burning in that questionable stew pot. Over in the corner, Jewish merchants pray toward Jerusalem, while some drunk Scythian vomits in the horse trough. It's like the world's worst hostel, but after weeks in the desert, you'll take it. The architecture wasn't fancy, but it got the job done. High walls with one heavily guarded gate easy to defend when raiders came knocking. Stables lined the inner courtyard, so you could keep an eye on your goods. Second-floor galleries had mats for sleeping, though sleeping meant curling up between snoring strangers who might relieve you of your coin purse before dawn. The smart travelers slept atop their merchandise like human padlocks. Here's where things got interesting. That grizzled old trader snoring next to you? He's carrying news from 3 kingdoms away. The Egyptian scribe haggling over dates knows which pharaoh just died. And those 2 drunk guards slurring insults at each other? They're debating battlefield tactics that'll show up in history. Books someday. Information traveled faster than people in these places, because every caravan took gossip to the next stop down the line. By the time you reached your destination, the rumors you'd heard at the first caravanserai had already lapped you. Mealtime was prime intelligence gathering. You'd share bread with some Armenian merchant who casually mentions the mountain pass ahead is washed out. The Carthaginian at the next platter let slip that copper prices just crashed in Damascus. Meanwhile, that quiet guy in the corner taking notes? Probably a spy's. The best business deals happened over these shared meals, often with minimal words, just finger-pointing at goods and hand signals for numbers. Table manners varied wildly. Try not to stare when the Parthian trader starts flicking meat scraps into his turban for later. The real social media was happening around the fire pits after dark. Travelers would pass along songs, jokes, and most importantly news tailored to their audience. Tell a story about bandits to Greek merchants, and suddenly the toll collectors. Cousin just happens to sell armed escorts. Mention a plague outbreak to Syrian weavers, and watch them reroute their entire caravan by morning. Exaggeration was expected. That rumor about 2-headed babies born in Babylon definitely started when someone misheard a drunk medic's story about difficult childbirths. Women ran their own information networks in these spaces. While men bragged about conquests, the female travelers exchanged practical knowledge at the washing areas, which herbs eased menstrual cramps, which villages had safe midwives, where to find friendly families willing to take in refugee children. A Jewish merchant's wife might teach a Persian noblewoman how to spot counterfeit pearls while doing laundry together. These conversations shaped everything from fashion trends to folk medicine across continents. The smartest innkeepers cultivated their own intelligence operations. That sweet old lady refilling your wine? She's memorizing your cargo list for her nephew, the tax collector. The stable boy accidentally brushing against your saddlebags? Checking how much silver you're carrying. Some caravanserais even maintained runner systems to get fresh news to the next stop before travelers arrived. Ancient insider trading at its finest. One surviving account describes a Persian inn that kept carrier pigeons for market updates. Not all exchanges were voluntary. That headache remedy some friendly traveler recommended probably contained enough opium to knock you out while his friends went through your bags. The prostitutes, both freelance and temple-sanctioned, doubled as information brokers, trading secrets for silver. Even the beggars at the gates had systems, signaling each other about which travelers tipped well versus who kicked stray dogs. Everyone was gaming the system somehow. The strangest part? These chaotic pits of humanity worked. A trader from Gaul could leave messages for his Armenian business partner at specific caravanserais, trusting they'd still be there months later. Religious pilgrims formed impromptu protection pacts with armed merchants heading the same way. Cooks adapted recipes on the fly for travelers with strange dietary taboos. The unspoken rule was simple: 'cause trouble and word would spread down the route faster than you could travel. Reputation mattered more than law. By dawn, the courtyard's a symphony of groaning men and braying donkeys. You rubbed the kink out. Of your neck, those stone pillows weren't kidding. And count your remaining coins. Maybe you swap your North African dates for some Chinese ginger while the guards change shifts. Perhaps you cut deals with that Macedonian mercenary group needing extra pack animals. Whatever happened here sticks with you. Maybe it's that new toothbrush twig the Egyptian recommended, or that haunting Syrian lullaby some mother sang to her child last night. Then the gates open, and it's back to the dust. But something's different now. Strangers who shared bread last evening nod like old friends when your paths cross down the trail. The songs you learn get hummed by new travelers weeks later. And somehow, against all logic, you feel less alone in this vast world than you did yesterday. These way stations weren't just stops. They were the glue holding ancient civilizations together, one uncomfortable night's sleep at a time. But all this road gossip and shared stew leads somewhere. Eventually, the longest journeys reach their endpoints, places where the walking stopped and the real work began. After months of blisters and bad food, you finally arrive where the money changes hands. And that's when history got really interesting. The morning air smells like cumin and donkey piss as you shoulder through the market gates. That sack of frankincense strapped to your back represents 6 months of walking, 2 bouts of dysentery, and 1 nasty camel might better sell it before. Some thief sniffs out where you're staying. Around you, a Babylonian merchant screams at a Greek over olive oil quality, while children weave through legs hawking stolen figs. Welcome to payday. Ancient markets operated on controlled chaos. Official. Trade hours? More like suggestions. The Assyrians liked dawn markets before the heat. Egyptians preferred afternoon shade, and Phoenicians would haggle by torchlight if they sniffed profit. Guards took bribes to overlook lost weights that magically made purchases lighter. Tax. Collectors lurked near popular stalls wearing bad disguises. You learned fast that friendly guy offering to translate? He works for the local crime boss taking percentages. The sensory assault was brutal. Rotten fruit squished underfoot while perfumed nobles walked by holding pomanders to their noses. Brass workers pounded sheets into bowls right next to slave auctions. Bleeding goats tangled their leads around spice displays. Some Macedonian mercenary would inevitably start a knife fight near the wine cellars. After 3 hours, your ears rang from a dozen languages shouting prices. Your eyes burned from incense smoke, and your nose gave up trying to identify smells altogether. Nothing had fixed prices. That nice Indian cotton tunic? Its cost changed depending on whether the caravan from Memphis arrived yet. Merchants invented shortages on the spot. Last shipment got raided by bandits. They'd say while their warehouse overflowed. Smart buyers waited until sundown when traders got desperate to unload goods before moving on. The real pros eavesdropped on caravan gossip. Heard about those pirate attacks near Cyprus? Time to buy up all the decent rope before prices triple. You develop survival skills fast. Never accept the first offer. That eager seller definitely cheated someone yesterday. Watch where the locals shop, not the fancy stalls with cushions. Keep one hand on your coin purse and the other on your lunch. Learn to recognize the 5 types of market thieves. The helpful porter who drops your cargo, the lost child picking pockets, the accidental shove from behind, the friendly drink offer spiked with sedatives, and the outright snatcher who'd grab and sprint. Cross-cultural trade had unspoken rules. Want to buy Persian carpets? Circle the item 3 times before mentioning price. Anything faster insulted the weaver's craft. Purchasing Egyptian papyrus? The seller expected you to unroll and pretend to read even if you were illiterate. Eastern spices required sniffing loudly to prove you were a serious buyer. Mess up these rituals and suddenly the last batch mysteriously vanished. But get it right, and you might score an invite to the back room with the good stuff. The real trading happened in silent gestures. A raised eyebrow meant your price is ridiculous. Tapping 3 fingers on the table signaled willingness to split. The difference. Spitting on your palm before shaking sealed deals better than contracts. Some signals crossed cultures. No merchant anywhere liked buyers who breathed too hard on their goods. Every veteran trader developed personal quirks, too. That Cushite leatherworker always threw in a free belt if you complimented his earrings. The Syrian wine seller doubled prices for anyone who didn't toast his health first. Luxury goods went mainstream through sheer persistence. That first brave soul bringing Chinese silk to Rome got laughed at who wears spider webs. Then some. Senator's wife tried it as undergarments. Soon every patrician wanted the scandalous fabric, And within decades, Syrian weavers perfected counterfeit blends for the middle class. Same happened with ivory, pearls, even nose rings. The cycle repeated endlessly. Outsiders scoff, elites adopt, merchants imitate, masses copy, and suddenly your kid sister wants that exotic Persian eyeliner too. Currency exchanges were nightmares. Imagine trying to calculate how many Athenian drachma equal one Babylonian shekel when both cities kept debasing their coins. Professional money changers sat cross-legged with tiny scales, biting coins to test purity. Many developed signature tricks. The Egyptian who could spit on a coin and smell its silver content. A Greek who threw coins to listen for the right clink. Their rates changed hourly based on traveler rumors. Heard a revolt in Lydia? Suddenly, nobody wants their lion-headed staters anymore. Markets spread technologies faster than wars. Some Carthaginian merchant demonstrates a revolutionary double-handled amphora design within months. Potters from Tripoli to Troy are copying it with local twists. A stranded Indian sailor teaches coastal farmers how to build rice paddies while waiting for his ransom. Even failure spread. Got disastrous Armenian wheeled plow that broke in rocky soil? 5 villages learned what not to do with wheels. Knowledge moved organically through thousands of small upgrades across generations. The personal risks were real. That Phoenician merchant boasting about his Tyrian purple dye monopoly? Found floating in the Tiber next week. Get too successful selling Anatolian iron, and suddenly the local blacksmiths mysteriously burn down your stall. Many traders intentionally spread misinformation. Yes, that northern route is totally safe, despite disappearing 3 caravans this season. The smart ones cultivated relationships with local toughs, paid protection money, and never stayed in the same inn twice. Women ran parallel markets behind the scenes. While men haggled over bulk spices, their wives traded birthing techniques and medicinal cures near the public ovens. Young girls carried secret messages between merchant families arranging marriages. Widows rented out back rooms for private transactions, extra for discretion. Some of antiquity's shrewdest business happened in these spaces. That harmless old lady selling bread? She brokered half the gem trade through her network of granddaughters. Married to port officials. Religious boundaries blurred at market stalls. Hindus bought Muslim prayer beads as exotic jewelry. Christians purchased Egyptian ankh amulets as decorative pieces. Zoroastrian fire altar designs showed up in Greek temples after some architect. Saw one in an Antioch bazaar. Sacred objects became fashionable, then mundane, then sacred again in new contexts. Nobody cared about original meanings if those Babylonian star charts sold well as bed decorations. Merchants would claim they cured gout too. The biggest profits came from accidental discoveries. That load of Indian soda ash meant for glassmaking? Turns out it makes better bread when your ship sinks and the bags get wet. The Chinese lacquerware that melted in desert heat looks gorgeous as a wall decoration when you scrape off the blobs. Ancient markets thrived on happy accidents repackaged as genius innovations. The best traders weren't just salesmen, they were cultural alchemists, turning misfits into trends. At sunset, the market transformed once more. Stalls packed up while tavern keepers rolled out barrels. Accountants tallied proceeds on wax tablets, cursing under their breath at bad debts. The real networking began over watered-down beer as caravan. Leaders swapped root tips and warnings. You'd hear wild stories. Some merchant claims he met a tribe where women proposed marriage by throwing yams. Guards would openly compare bribes received. By midnight, half-truths became accepted facts that would spread across continents within the year. These chaotic gatherings quietly changed economics forever. Fixed prices? Come back when you invent. Writing for price tags. Customer service? Try not getting stabbed first. But somehow, through all the cheating and chaos, goods moved from producers to consumers across thousands of miles without email spreadsheets or corporate overlords. The entire Mediterranean ate from standardized amphorae nobody officially regulated. Chinese silks reached London before either place knew the other existed. Yet something else traveled with the goods, something invisible and often deadly. Those sweating merchants weren't just carrying spices and silver. And when unwelcome stowaways jumped ship at bustling ports, civilizations would never be the same again. That ache in your joints isn't just from sleeping on rocky ground again. By the third morning, the fever hits hard enough to make your teeth chatter despite the desert heat. You tell yourself it's just bad water until you notice the merchant. From Samarkand coughing blood into his sleeve 3 camels back. Too late now. Whatever's in your bloodstream is already hitching a ride to the next town. Ancient travelers didn't just carry goods, they carried disasters. That itchy wool tunic from Antioch might have fleas carrying plague. Those fancy Egyptian linens could hide smallpox scabs. Silk Road traders unwittingly transported more than spices when they moved between empires. Disease traveled faster than news, outpacing warnings by weeks. A perfectly healthy caravan could arrive in Rome just as rumors started spreading about some sickness back in Parthia, by which point half the merchants already dispersed to Gaul and Carthage. The mathematics of plagues worked quietly. It took 30 days to walk from Constantinople to Damascus. Exactly how long it took typhoid to go from mild headache to organ failure. By the time a city noticed foreigners dying in its streets, 10 more infected caravans had already left through other gates. Ships were worse. A trader vomiting over the rail in Alexandria meant an epidemic incubating in every port down the coast. Nobody understood transmission, but they noticed patterns. Romans figured out that packs of foreign dogs preceded malaria outbreaks. Chinese doctors connected rat sightings with buboes appearing on patients. Persian physicians observed that cloth from infected households spread sickness even after being washed. Their solutions were creative, if ineffective, burning barrels of asphalt to purify air, rubbing onion paste on money before spending it, avoiding sick people during certain moon phases. Quarantine was mostly theater. When the Justinian plague hit Constantinople, officials tried isolating ships for 40 days, hence quarantino, from the Italian for 40. Problem was, rats swam ashore while bureaucrats counted days. Land quarantine worked slightly better. Some Persian caravanserais had separate stables for arrivals from suspicious regions. Jewish communities established kashrut rules that accidentally reduced foodborne illnesses. Mostly, though, sick travelers just got driven into the wilderness to die quietly. The deadliest stowaways specialized in deception. Malaria felt like regular fever until your skin turned yellow. Smallpox's watery blisters looked harmless until they started filling with pus. Leprosy took years to show symptoms, plenty of time to marry, have kids, and infect a village. Typhoid carriers stayed contagious while feeling perfectly healthy. These diseases exploited human connections mercilessly. That friendly trader sharing his water skin? Patient zero. Some outbreaks reshaped continents faster than wars. When the Black Death finally tailed off in 1350, Europe lacked so many workers that serfdom collapsed. The plague of Athens in 430 BC killed Pericles and possibly changed the Peloponnesian War's outcome. Cities hit by cholera often saw pogroms against foreigners, despite the disease blooming in local sewage. The Antonine Plague of 165 AD killed Rome's best generals just as barbarians pressed the borders. Merchants developed their own early warning systems. If a normally bustling port looked deserted, captains anchored offshore to listen for funeral bells. Travelers knew to check whether local dogs seemed skittish or if undertakers worked overtime. Some caravans employed plague watchers, people immune from previous exposure, who'd enter towns first as test subjects. Armenian traders insisted on meeting clients outdoors upwind, a practice that actually worked somewhat. Genetic evidence shows how thoroughly sickness traveled. Strain variants prove bubonic plague circled the Silk Road at least 3 separate times before the Black Death. Smallpox strains diversified along human migration paths like gruesome breadcrumbs. Even relatively isolated places like Iceland got hit hard whenever a ship brought some new virus their ancestors never encountered. Immunity was local, but barely bothered Indians could slaughter entire Germanic tribes. Governments responded clumsily. Egyptian officials tried banning certain imports during outbreaks, meaning smugglers just hid contaminated fabrics better. Roman laws required burning plague victims' possessions, creating black markets for untested corpses' valuables. Chinese magistrates ordered streets scrubbed with vinegar while ignoring the rats scurrying under floorboards. Everybody blamed somebody else. For Persians, it was the dirty Huns. For Greeks, it was those unhygienic barbarians up north. Women bore disproportionate risks. Midwives catching childbed fever from no-bell births spread it to peasant huts. Next week, female merchants traveling with caravans got stuck nursing sick companions, multiplying exposures. Laundry workers handling infected linings died in droves. Temple priestesses tending the ill became super spreaders. Athens lost half its sacred prostitutes in one plague summer. Still, some survived to inherit unexpected wealth when male relatives died off. Children suffered uniquely. Adults might. Rally from measles kids rarely did. Newborns lacked immunity to anything beyond village-level diseases. Malaria hit young bodies hardest, leaving grieving parents who'd never known mosquitoes carried it. Some plagues selectively killed children, while sparing adults, altering population pyramids for generations. The worst outbreaks left villages with no marriages for decades, just hollow-eyed elders and empty cradles. Recovery periods changed history. Athens took generations to rebound after its plague, losing cultural dominance. The Roman army shrank so drastically after epidemics that they began recruiting barbarians, eventually leading to the empire's unraveling. Constantinople never regained its pre-Justinianic population, making later Arab conquests easier. Places that bounced back fastest often did so through brutal means. Venice survived by sealing plague houses with families inside. Elites weren't spared. Emperor Marcus Aurelius died of plague during war. The Ptolemaic dynasty lost multiple heirs to early graves. King Attila of the Huns might have succumbed to disease rather than battle. When sickness could decimate palaces as easily as slums, it became the great equalizer, even if rich folks got buried in spices, while peasants got dumped in pits. The walking wounded carried invisible scars. Survivors of the Cyprian plague described losing the ability to remember loved ones' faces. Smallpox left millions blind or disfigured, creating demand for exotic eye paints and veils. Those recovering from ergot poisoning developed permanent hallucinations that seeded new religious movements. Some historians think the Dionysian cult's frenzy came from moldy grain shipments. Physical journeys altered minds just as permanently as landscapes. Modern DNA preserves these tragedies. Many Europeans carry immune mutations from surviving the Black Death. Native Americans lack certain Old World disease resistances because their ancestors crossed land bridges too early for some plagues to evolve. Australian Aboriginals remained isolated long enough to develop unique immunological profiles, which made European colonists' germs catastrophic. Your very cells remember journeys your history books forgot. Yet still they traveled. Despite all logic, knowing the risks, humans kept loading camels and boarding ships. Because the alternative staying put in shrinking villages as the world moved past felt like its own slow death. At least on the road, you might outrun the sickness another year, or find someplace the last plague hadn't reached yet, or trade your way into the wealthy class that got doctors instead of ditch burials. And sometimes, when the fever broke and the road dust cleared, survivors found themselves changed in ways beyond illness. A man who nearly died in a foreign caravanserai might wake up certain the local god saved him. A merchant's daughter spared, while siblings perished, could interpret it as a sign to join temple virgins. The road's punishment became its strange gift-breaking bodies, but sometimes opening minds to revelations no homebound priest could fathom. Because after brush with mortality under alien stars, pilgrims reported visions regular folk never saw. Traders who survived plagues developed cult followings as lucky protectors. Exhausted travelers reaching mountain shrines swore deities spoke through delirium. The sickest journeys spawned the strangest faiths, from Christian desert hermits to Buddhist monks, convinced suffering purified karma. It wasn't theology that spread fastest along trade routes, but raw mystical experience. That gaunt merchant coughing by the roadside isn't just carrying fabrics or glass beads anymore. He's smuggling something more dangerous: ideas. Ideas about death being just a doorway, about suffering having meaning, about gods who favored travelers not because they were healthy, but because they'd seen too much to believe the old village superstitions anymore. Every wheezing breath carries whispers of revelations that could dismantle empires built on comfortable lies. Imagine limping home after surviving sickness in 6 cities, only to find your old village's rituals suddenly childish. The protective amulets that didn't stop fever, the local healer's herbs that failed compared to some foreign remedy, the elders' explanations that collapsed against realities you witnessed firsthand. After such journeys, either you became the village crazy person, or you started a new cult that eventually swallowed the old ways whole. Plagues didn't just kill populations, they killed certainties. And in those gaps left by crumbling traditions, footsore survivors planted the seeds of beliefs flexible enough for a connected world. The gods of static agricultural societies made less sense to people who'd seen how random death could be across civilizations. What emerged instead were faiths for travelers, portable, personal, and strangely comforting in their acknowledgement of universal suffering, which explains why the next caravan setting out at dawn includes not just the usual merchants and guards, but also a ragged figure in patchwork robes, preaching radically about kindness across tribes. Nobody takes him seriously until the fevers start again. Then suddenly his mantra about all humans being interconnected sounds less like philosophy and more like the only truth that matters when your skin's burning up and the only hands offering water belong to strangers. Your blistered feet have carried you 900 miles when you finally see it. The temple spire shimmering through heat haze. Every step for months has brought searing pain-burst blisters, swollen knees, muscles that scream with each movement. Yet, here you are, walking faster now, because somewhere in the rhythm of misery, you stopped noticing the agony. That's when the real journey began. Pilgrimages made masochism sacred across civilizations. Hindus still trek barefoot up icy Himalayan passes to reach Shiva's home. Buddhist monks in Japan walk till blood soaks straw sandals along the 88 temple circuit. Medieval Christians crawled the last miles to Canterbury on hands and knees. The universal rule: the more it hurts, the more it counts. Your average peasant couldn't read scriptures, but they could understand blistered feet as holy currency. That first week on the road was always the hardest. Your body rebels against unrelenting motion, muscles tighten, tendons inflame, toenails blacken and fall off. Blisters burst and reform until calluses grow like armor. Pilgrim journals mention walking through rivers of fire in their legs. But around day 30, something shifts. The pain doesn't disappear, it becomes the journey itself. Monks called this the body's surrender, when aching muscles finally stop fighting the endless motion. Landscapes sculpted religions. Through sheer exhaustion, Zoroastrians saw divine purity in mountain summits, because climbing them left you gasping like a fish. Desert crossings birthed monotheisms. When you walk weeks seeing nothing but sand, one god feels more plausible than many. Hindu cosmology describes 7 heavenly rivers, because crossing that many actual rivers to reach Varanasi could certainly kill you. Sacred geography wasn't philosophy. It was footnotes left by countless dusty sandals. Ritual transformed agony into meaning. Japanese Henro pilgrims wear identical white robes symbolizing death to their old lives appropriate. Since about 1 in 20 medieval pilgrims died en route. Muslim hajis still stone pillars representing Satan, a practice originating from travelers taking out rage after months of desert hardship. Storytellers along the Camino de Santiago spun tales where saints suffered exactly like modern walkers blistered. Feet, stolen supplies, corrupt innkeepers. Misery loved sacred company. The walking mind does strange things after weeks of repetition. Time stretches and contracts. You forget what day it is, but remember every pebble on yesterday's path. Songs get stuck in your head for days until the lyrics lose meaning. Visions appear. That boulder looks like your late mother's face. Those clouds form the exact shape of the temple you seek. Ancient wayfarers didn't hallucinate gods. They walked until everything looked divine. Pilgrim routes became spiritual conveyor belts. Merchants sold Buddha amulets to Christians who thought they represented some martyr. Sufi mystics picked up Hindu breathing techniques while resting at shared caravanserais. Armenian traders brought home pieces of the true cross that turned out to be random wood chips. Not that anyone complained when miracles happened anyway. The Silk Road didn't just transport goods. It syncretized faiths through millions of footfalls. Discomfort bred revelation. A medieval nun walking to Rome realized her vows felt hollow after seeing priests party in brothels. A Buddhist trader achieved enlightenment not in some lotus position, but while vomiting from altitude sickness on a mountain pass. The Desert Fathers didn't choose wilderness to escape people. They went where the lack of water ensured no casual. Visitors would interrupt their despair. Spiritual breakthroughs preferred the company of exhaustion. Returning pilgrims scared villages. After months of walking, they spoke strangely, dressed oddly, and kept pacing instead of sitting normally. Some babbled about visions. Others refused to discuss their journeys at all. Their feet stayed swollen for months, as if still instinctively trying to walk. Wives whispered that their husbands returned, different, more impatient with local pieties, yet kinder to foreign beggars. You couldn't unsee what the road showed you. The Camino de Santiago's Mojones ancient stone markers still bear groove from millions of walking staffs striking them. Each groove represents a moment when someone leaned heavily against cold stone, questioning every life choice that brought them there. Yet they kept walking, not necessarily because they found faith, but because turning back would make the suffering meaningless. In this way, pilgrimage mirrored life. You endure because stopping hurts more. Children spotted returning pilgrims first. They'd come scrambling down village paths shouting, "Walker! Walker!" Equal parts warning and celebration. The pilgrim would shuffle into town smelling of road dirt and unwashed wool. Neighbors peeked through shutters, assessing whether the journey had taken their friend's mind. Old drinking buddies hesitated before inviting them to the tavern. Who knew what heresies they'd picked up abroad? Europe's most famous. Pilgrim Marjorie Kemp returned from Jerusalem convinced God wanted her to cry publicly at random moments. Locals found this annoying rather than holy. Japanese pilgrims developed temple madness, an obsession with counting every single sacred site that could border on psychosis. The line between enlightenment and mental breakdown depended largely on whether your community still found you useful afterward. Foot travel forged portable faiths. Judaism survived diaspora because its rituals didn't require fixed temples, just memory and stubbornness. Islam standardized prayer times based on caravan rest stops. Protestantism spread along trade routes where literate merchants read smuggled Bibles aloud at inns. The religions that endured were those you could carry in your head and practice while limping down some godforsaken trail. The poorest pilgrims often returned richest. Mendicants walking barefoot collected alms to pray for donors, a brilliant scheme where townspeople paid them to leave faster. Some faked holy poverty so convincingly they started believing it. A whole subclass of professional pilgrims emerged, recognizable by their 1,000-yard stares and refusal to stay anywhere more than one night. After enough walking, even charlatans became sincere. Modern hikers report eerily similar experiences to medieval accounts. The Virginia blues on the Appalachian Trail mirror descriptions from 12th century Santiago pilgrims. Human feet haven't changed much, nor have the rhythms of exhaustion. What we've lost is the cultural framework that made suffering meaningful. Today's thru-hikers walk because they're bored. Ancient pilgrims walked because they needed answers that only miles could provide. Evidence of these trudging multitudes lingers in odd places. The soles of medieval pilgrim shoes show more wear on the left side. Apparently, everyone favored that foot when climbing hills. Roman roads have deeper ruts on pilgrimage routes, where centuries of dragging feet eroded stone. Even our language preserves it. Saunter comes from medieval French for walking to the Holy Land. The word itself is a fossilized journey. Why did they do it? For promises of salvation, sure, but also because staying put felt like slow death after your friend returned speaking of the golden temple where lepers danced. Because the village priest's platitudes rang hollow once you'd met a Ugandan mystic who slept on nails. Because some questions about suffering, purpose, what follows death, can't be answered standing still. You have to wear down your solace before the soul gets restless. That grimy pilgrim collapsing at the temple gates today looks like a vagabond to guards. They don't see the blisters healed into calluses, the nights shivering under inadequate cloaks, the rationed handfuls of moldy grain. They certainly can't fathom why he's smiling through cracked lips as priests drag him towards sacred waters. But you might understand. After enough miles, even pain becomes a kind of blessing proof the journey was real. Homecoming posed its own dangers. After drinking from Buddhist wells and Muslim oasis pools, village ale tasted foul. Local gods seemed petty compared to the deities who'd guided you through sandstorms. Those who left seeking reassurance often returned with uncomfortable questions. Small wonder some pilgrims kept walking past their hometowns, becoming permanent wanderers. Easier to blame restless feet than admit home no longer fit. The strangest converts were accidental ones. Take the Scandinavian trader who joined a pilgrimage caravan for protection, scoffed at the superstitious rituals, then found himself crawling the final mile like everyone else. or the Athenian skeptic who intended to debunk Eleusinian mysteries, only to emerge pale and trembling, refusing to ever speak of what he witnessed. Long walks have a way of humbling even the proudest minds. Ancient inn registers show curious patterns. Pilgrims heading toward holy sites complained about hard beds and bad food. Those returning home wrote mystical poetry in the margins, as if the act of walking had sanded down their cynicism. Maybe blistered feet were the original meditation cushions. Or perhaps, after months of your own stench, anything smelled like enlightenment. Modern highways now overlay old pilgrim trails fitting, since both represent humanity's stubborn urge to move. Cars zip past the stones where generations knelt to rest, their sped-up journeys accomplishing in hours what once took years of agony. We've kept the going, but lost the getting there. The destination arrives too quickly now, with no time for calluses to form or revelations to simmer. Yet occasionally, somewhere along Spain's Camino or Japan's Shikoku Trail, you'll spot an old farmer hobbling with a wooden staff. He moves deliberately, pausing often to touch weathered statues. Ask why he walks, and he'll shrug. It's just what his grandfather did, and his grandfather before him. But watch him at dusk, when he thinks no one's looking. That's when his hand strays to the sore small of his back, fingers testing the ache like a holy relic. Those calloused hands built civilizations we now see as fixed. The Great Wall, the pyramids, Angkor Wat all depended on workers who walked to sites year after year, carrying faith in their sore muscles. Maybe that's the final lesson. Anything lasting requires enough forward motion to leave blood in the dust. Not because the gods demand suffering, but because nothing changes until someone hurts enough to make it so. Tomorrow at dawn, another caravan gathers outside the city gates. Merchants check rope knots, guards test spear points, pilgrims murmur prayers. What divides them isn't as important as what they share, the understanding that real journeys change you in ways you can't predict. Some will return rich, others broken, a few not at all. But right now, with the road stretching empty before them, anything seems possible. Even holiness. That pilgrim you mocked last summer? He's the one they bring wild stories about now. How he healed a sick child with foreign herbs. How he predicted the earthquake days before it came. How he sits smiling in the poorhouse, legs too ruined to walk again, yet somehow more at peace than anyone. The village whispers he found something out there beyond the mountains. But you'll never know for sure unless you lace your own sandals tight one morning and find out firsthand. Still, it's easier to stay put, tending fires and pretending not to hear the road calling. Until the day your daughter asks why the stars look different here than in Grandpa's stories of desert skies. Until the well runs dry and the usual prayers bring only silence. Until staying becomes harder than leaving. Then you'll understand why millions before you rose at dawn took that first painful step and kept walking towards something they couldn't name, but knew they'd recognize when it blistered their feet raw. The priest says gods live in temples. The merchant claims paradise lies across oceans. But pilgrims know the truth divinity hides in the space between footfalls, When you're too tired to think, and the world goes quiet at last, it's not enlightenment they find at journey's end, but whatever they needed badly enough to walk that far. Tomorrow's roads wait. Someone has to walk them. Why not you? The village elders called him Broken Nose behind his back, though he'd earned that crooked bridge fighting bandits near Samarkand. When he limped home after 7 years away, nobody recognized him at first. His beard had gray streaks. His Egyptian linen tunic looked absurdly thin for mountain winters. And worst of all, he kept using foreign words nobody understood. Then he pulled that strange curved knife from his pack, and the real trouble started. Returning travelers were walking culture shocks. That cousin who left to sell goatskins might come back, insisting everyone start washing hands before meals. Like some Persian noble, the blacksmith's apprentice could return with revolutionary furnace designs and revolutionary ideas. About women working bellows, too. Villages had two choices: adapt or ostracize. Most did some of both, creating uneasy compromises that reshaped civilizations. Initial reactions usually involved ridicule. When Broken Nose demonstrated his silly curved sickle from Mesopotamia, farmers laughed at how it looked like a drunkard's moon. Then harvest came. His fields yielded 30% more grain because the new tool cut stalks cleaner. Suddenly, the jokes stopped, replaced by muttered accusations of witchcraft. Progress always pissed somebody off. Resistance took creative forms. Traditionalists claimed foreign plows angered earth spirits. Conservative priests declared new irrigation methods violated divine water rights. One Anatolian village allegedly stoned a man for suggesting olive presses could work without slave labor until the olive blight hit and his methods saved the harvest. Even obvious improvements faced generations of stubborn opposition. The adoption process followed predictable stages. First denial, our father's ways worked fine. Then passive aggression, try your fool method on the rocky field. Then reluctant acceptance, fine, but don't tell the priest. By the time grandchildren forgot which ideas were foreign, traditionalists claimed they'd always been local wisdom. Human memories conveniently reshaped themselves around useful lies. Agricultural innovations spread through grudging imitation. That three-field rotation system from Gaul, adopted village by village as people noticed neighbors' fuller granaries. The Chinese seed drill took centuries to cross continents because nobody trusted something that looked like a child's toy. But once yields improved, even the most conservative elder found reasons why his grandfather basically did the same thing. Metalworking changes moved faster, fueled by greed. When a returning mercenary showed how Hittite smiths layered iron, every weapons dealer from Carthage to Cornwall wanted in. Within decades, inferior local versions appeared everywhere, some so badly made they shattered in battle. But the genie stayed out of the bottle. Once you'd seen steel, bronze felt like playing at war. Religious innovations caused the ugliest fights. A sailor returning from India might start honoring some elephant-headed god, prompting his neighbors to accidentally burn his barn. Yet foreign spiritual ideas kept creeping in. Zoroastrian afterlife concepts colored Jewish resurrection beliefs. Buddhist meditation techniques influenced Christian hermits. Nobody admitted borrowing, but the theological fingerprints were everywhere. Women travelers faced special challenges. A widow returning from Alexandria with new midwifery techniques risked accusations of dark magic until noblewomen secretly requested her services. Female merchants bringing back exotic fabrics often disguised them as local products until trends shifted. One Sicilian woman reportedly introduced lemons as yellow limes to avoid alarming traditionalists. Progress wore many disguises. Language itself transformed through these small betrayals. That ancient proverb your grandfather loves? Probably a misremembered Babylonian saying some traitor mangled generations back. The traditional folk song about the harvest might contain Phoenician sailing terns repurposed for farming. Even resistance became a form of adoption, like protesting Roman baths while quietly enjoying the heated floors. Some technologies spread through sheer desperation. When the Justinian plague emptied villages, survivors adopted any idea that might help. Armenian quarantine practices, Egyptian burial spices, even that weird Thracian habit of burning corpses despite ancestral taboos. Crisis made pragmatists of the most stubborn traditionalists. Nothing cured cultural conservatism like watching children die. The printing press followed this messy adoption pattern perfectly. Initially, monks dismissed it as mechanized heresy. Then they noticed how quickly Protestant pamphlets spread. Within decades, Catholic presses churned out indulgences twice as fast. Every revolutionary technology eventually gets co-opted by the establishment after sufficient resistance to maintain appearances. Food innovations faced the least resistance because nobody questions a full stomach. That strange Persian rice dish became Italian risotto once people tasted it. Indian spices snuck into European cuisine via crusaders' rucksacks. The tomato, once feared as a devil's apple, conquered global diets by being too delicious to resist. Cultural exchange always worked fastest through the stomach. Children were the secret agents of change. They'd pester parents for those cool Babylonian spinning tops, or beg to eat that sweet paste from Crete, honey. Adults might dismiss foreign ideas, but couldn't say no to wide-eyed kids forever. Many innovations actually entered cultures as toys or treats before anyone recognized their practical value. The stranger's legacy often outlived his name. That Carthaginian merchant who introduced better ship caulking? Forgotten within generations, though every vessel still used his methods. The Thracian slave who taught vine grafting? His contribution reduced to how we've always grown grapes. History remembered conquerors and kings, not the travelers whose small changes actually reshaped daily life. Returning travelers themselves rarely got thanked. Broken Nose died in a winter storm after rescuing neighbors' sheep, the same neighbors who'd mocked his foreign ways. His curved sickle became standard equipment within 10 years, though folks claimed it was old Granny's design. The village drunk still occasionally joked about that time. Broken Nose tried to introduce forks, the pretentious bastard. Cultural adaptation wasn't gentle assimilation. It was constant low-grade conflict. Every new idea faced layers of resistance. from mocking ballads to outright violence. Yet somehow, through generations of trial and error, useful things persisted. The sickle, the plow, the alphabet all survived their initial rejection to become timeless traditions. Human progress moved at the speed of stubbornness. Modern archaeology reveals these layered adoptions. Dig up any traditional village and you'll find Persian coins in Celtic graves, Chinese silk in Viking burials, African ivory in medieval churches. The artifacts prove what written histories often ignore: ordinary people were always stealing good ideas from each other, then pretending they'd invented them. Nationalism is a recent fiction. That's why you can still trace ancient networks in unlikely places. The traditional Swiss cheese-making technique probably came from Mongolian yak herders via some forgotten traveler. The distinctive curve of Spanish guitars might owe something to Arabic lutes carried across deserts centuries ago. Even isolationist cultures were never as isolated as they claimed. The next time you see some exotic item in a museum, remember, it likely survived because somebody's ancestor thought, this strange thing works better. Maybe they admitted borrowing it. Probably they didn't. Either way, that object represents countless unnamed travelers who endured blisters, bandits, and mockery to carry progress one heavy step at a time. So here's to Broken Nose and all the other forgotten innovators. The ones who walked too far, came back weird, and changed everything despite the laughter. The ones whose ideas only became respectable after they died. The ones who understood that culture isn't some sacred artifact. It's just a suitcase constantly being unpacked and repacked by restless travelers. Because when you think about it, all traditions are just successful imports with the label scratched off. And the world's most revolutionary act might still be coming home with strange ideas and waiting, however long it takes for everyone else to catch up. Now look down at your feet. Those calluses? They're not just from walking. They're from carrying the future while everyone else clings to the past. Keep walking. Someone will thank you eventually. Even if it's centuries later in a museum label they get wrong. But enough about forgotten travelers. Let's talk about the roads they wore into the earth. Those paths didn't vanish when caravans stopped using them. If you know where to look, the ancient networks still whisper their secrets. That highway exit ramp you just passed? It probably follows the same curve as an old cattle path from 500 BC. Modern roads are often just ancient footpaths paved over, because humans and animals alike tend to take the most logical route between points. The difference is today, you're sipping coffee at 70 miles per hour, while someone's ancestor walked that same line barefoot, wondering if bandits waited around the next bend. Geologists can spot ancient routes using surprising clues. Soil along old pathways gets compacted differently denser and more layered from centuries of footsteps. They found trails in the Alps where the dirt still shows faint traces of copper from traders' leaky ore sacks. In Jordan, satellite images reveal ghostly straight lines where Roman roads once ran, visible only because the underlying rock fractures differently where heavy carts rolled. The land remembers what history books forgot. Place names are time. Capsules of movement. Every Stratford marks a river crossing, street ford. Chester. Endings come from Roman camps, castra. The Silk Road town of Merv was called Maru by Persians, Antiochia by Greeks, and Maliwu by Chinese travelers. Same spot, different name tags from passing cultures. Even New York's Broadway follows a Lenape trail once called Wickwaskick. Roads outlive empires that built them. Your DNA might be a map of ancient routes. Geneticists tracing the lactase mutation, what lets some adults digest milk, found it spread along herding migration paths. The Black Death left immune system markers that still show up in Mediterranean descendants. One study found that British genes shift gradually along old Roman roads, like a biological tide mark, showing how soldiers and traders mixed with locals. The past walks around in your cells. Modern pilgrims still test these old paths. The Camino de Santiago's most popular route follows a 9th century trail where medieval walkers left bronze scallop shell badges, early versions of today's souvenir t-shirts. Japan's Kumano-Kodo pilgrimage has hosted emperors and peasants for 1,200 years. Some Hindu devotees walk 600 miles to Himalayan shrines barefoot, retracing steps etched by generations before GPS existed. The blisters haven't changed much. Archaeologists find the best evidence in garbage. Roman roads are lined with broken amphorae, the equivalent of truckers tossing soda bottles. The Appian Way has layers of donkey dung preserved under volcanic ash. One Silk Road stop yielded 300-year-old melon seeds in latrine pits, proving what travelers snacked on between sandstorms. Even toilets tell stories when you know how to listen. Some ancient routes persist through sheer stubbornness. The Inca highway system stretched 25,000 miles, with suspension bridges made of woven grass. A few bridges lasted till 2001, rebuilt annually by locals until modern steel replaced them. In Turkey, sections of the Royal Road built 2,500 years ago still handle farm tractors. Good engineering transcends centuries, though the original pothole complaints are lost to history. Language carries road dust in odd ways. The word travel comes from travail, meaning painful labor. Journey derives from diurnum, a Roman day's march. Even mile originates from Latin mil passus, 1,000 paces. Our vocabulary still smells of sore feet and dusty cloaks. Next time you say you're making good time on the highway, remember someone once said that while picking gravel from their sandals, the rhythm of walking shaped early knowledge. Roman mile markers doubled. As sundials, your shadow showed distances. Arabic desert guides timed marshes by singing specific verses. Finish the song cycle and you'd reach water. Chinese merchants counted strides with abacus beads tied to belts. Precise navigation emerged from putting one foot in front of another. For generations, modern logistics paled beside ancient ingenuity. The Persian royal courier system could relay messages 1,600 miles in a week using relay stations and fresh horses. Roman ships transported Egyptian grain faster than 18th century sailing packets. An Incan runner network crossed mountains faster. than modern postal services until the 1900s. We didn't invent efficiency, just engines to make us lazier at it. Roadside hospitality hasn't changed much either. Caravanserais offered stables, baths, and guards, basically ancient truck stops. Tabernae, taverns, lined Roman roads every 10 miles serving wine and questionable stew. The closest modern equivalent might be highway service plazas, though thankfully today's rest stops rarely double as brothels or gladiator recruiting centers. Progress is relative. Relics still turn up along old routes. A Danish farmer recently plowed up a Viking arm ring beside an ancient trail. Tibetan pilgrims leave prayer stones along paths that later become hiking trails. Even in America, the Oregon Trail has graves holding buttons, bullets, and the occasional abandoned stove. Objects fall, earth covers them. Memory fades until some shovel strikes metal unexpectedly. Military roads outlasted their builders. Napoleon's engineers paved paths that became Route Nationale 85. Eisenhower's interstate system borrowed from Roman military logistics. The strange part? Many began as game trails animals created to avoid predators. That asphalt ribbon carrying. Your Uber probably started as deer paths leading to water. Civilization is just nature paved over. Trade turned pathways into melting pots. Excavations along the Amber Road, a Baltic to Mediterranean trade route, reveal Egyptian glass beads in Polish bogs and Nordic brooches in Italian tombs. The Silk Road was more like a spaghetti bowl of roots, where a Chinese ceramic cup might wind up in a Viking feast through 20 middlemen. Globalism isn't new, just faster now. Some routes vanished spectacularly. The Bactrian gold trade collapsed when desert wells dried up, leaving caravans to mummify where they fell. Maya white roads dissolved into jungle after droughts emptied cities. Climate change isn't just modern, it erased civilizations that bet everything on roads to nowhere. Take that next highway exit while you still can. Modern tech helps reconstruct lost paths. LiDAR scans in Cambodia revealed Angkor's 900-mile road network under jungle canopy. Drones map Saharan trade routes using camel tracks invisible from ground level. Even Google Earth helps archaeologists spot straight lines in grasslands where nomads once drove herds to market. Sometimes progress means seeing what was always there. The weirdest survival? Pilgrim badges. These cheap lead, tin souvenirs from holy sites appear globally, Venetian ones in English mittens, Japanese temple charms in Korean ports. They're the ancient version of refrigerator magnets, proving tourism hasn't changed much. My parents visited Delphi, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. Energy spans millennia. Walking these routes today feels different, yet familiar. Blisters still form in the same spots medieval pilgrims complained about. Pack animals still balk at rushing streams where their ancestors drowned. Stars that guided desert caravans still shine, though now competing with light pollution. The body remembers journeys the mind can't fathom. What's left today isn't just crumbling pavement. It's DNA markers from long-dead traders. Family recipes with inexplicable spices. Folk songs. containing misremembered phrases from lost languages. The past never really disappears. It just gets repurposed until origins become irrelevant. Those footsteps echo in everything from your breakfast coffee to the asphalt beneath your tires. So next time you're stuck in traffic, remember you're part of an unbroken chain stretching back to some barefoot farmer leading a donkey loaded with salt. The vehicles changed. The complaining didn't. And if civilization collapses tomorrow, bet people would rediscover these same paths within generations, wearing blisters into familiar dust while chasing whatever passes for trade goods. Because underneath all our concrete and satellites, humans still navigate like our ancestors did, toward water, weather, and opportunity. The tools evolve, but the compass stays the same. Those old roads knew where they were going. Maybe we should pay attention. Now, if you think connecting cultures by foot sounds exhausting, imagine doing it with zero maps, hostile locals, and a donkey that bites. But somebody kept walking anyway, and that's why you're drinking coffee from Colombia while wearing Egyptian cotton. The real question isn't how they traveled so far, it's why we ever stopped. They walked so we wouldn't have to 3,000 miles for a sack of salt, months on the road just to hear a stranger's story. Those calloused feet built everything from spice routes to religions, one plodding step at a time. Today you can video call someone halfway around the world, but you'll never feel how wheat grows differently in their soil or taste water from their wells. Maybe we lost something when travel stopped hurting. Try walking somewhere new this week, not for exercise, but to remember how ideas really spread, slowly, painfully, with blisters that turn into wisdom.